All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Design Review Panel virtual meeting. This is the third and final item on our agenda today, and we're reviewing the development proposal for 399 Greenhill Avenue in Hamilton. My name is Edward Winter. I'm an urban designer at the city, and I'm hosting this meeting, but panel member David Clucio will chair this meeting. In addition to the panel members, we have the applicant team, city staff, and members of the public and media observing. Members of the public are welcome to observe, but we remind everyone that only panel members and city staff and the applicant team will be speaking today. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the city's Design Review Panel webpage. And just a friendly reminder for everyone to keep your microphones muted if you're not speaking. All right, thank you, David. You may begin when ready.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome. Edward, can you please confirm that this session is being recorded?
Yes, we are recording.
And are there any changes to the agenda today?
No, there are no changes.
Okay, I'll take the silence that there are no panel members who have a conflict on this project. Okay, then the third item on the agenda today is the review of 399 Greenhill Avenue. The lead planner on the file is Mark Kellier. Good afternoon, Mark. We're ready for your presentation. Please keep the presentation under 10 minutes. We're not hearing you, Mark, if you're saying anything. But we can see your slides.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Just start my slideshow. So again, my name is Mark Kaler. I'm a senior planner on the urban team, and I'm the staff planner, development planner assigned to this file at 399 Greenhill Avenue. So this is a proposal to permit a mixed-use development consisting of two 12-story, 36.5-meter buildings and two 3-story, 11-meter buildings with a total of 427 dwelling units, 1,000 square meters of commercial, and 481 parking spaces. This is a large-scale proposal that has the potential to impact the physical environment, both functionally and aesthetically. So staff have requested design review panels review in conjunction with a proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment that have been submitted and deemed complete by the city. So this is the location of the site. It's located at the northwest corner of Mount Albion Road and Greenhill Avenue. It's currently occupied by a 2-story commercial plaza with a surface parking lot. It's kind of a central retail hub for the surrounding neighborhood that consists mostly of lower scale townhouse, detached and semi-detached dwellings. There are existing 12-story multiple dwellings directly to the north, and then further to the south along Mount Albion Road, there's an additional multiple dwelling. And you can see it's a few hundred meters east of the Red Hill Valley Parkway that you can see just off the edge of the screen. So here's a photo of the subject site from Greenhill Avenue. You can see there's a larger retail unit that's currently vacant, but there's still some commercial uses and a surface parking lot located on site, and you can see the existing multiple dwellings behind. Here's another view of the plaza from the intersection of Greenhill and Mount Albion. This is the back of the plaza from Mount Albion looking west. And here's a view of the site from the west of the property. This is at the intersection of Greenhill and Harrisford. Here's another view of the adjacent multiple dwellings, approximately 12 stories. And then to the west, you have townhouse development. Similarly to the north, there's some semi-detached dwellings. You can see they are backlotted. This is somewhat common in this neighborhood. There's another example, some townhouse dwellings located to the east. And then to the northeast, it goes into more a detached, semi-detached neighborhood. So just quickly, this is what's being proposed. You can see two 12-story multiple dwellings, and then two three-story townhouse dwellings. Bylaw would define them as multiple dwellings, I believe, but they do function as townhouse units with entrances at grade. And then you can see surface landscaping and a private road at the back of the site. Quickly here again are the elevations. You can see the two 12-story buildings and the townhouse units. So in the Urban Hamilton official plan on the urban structure, Schedule E, it is identified as within a neighborhoods element. Similarly, in Schedule E1, the land use designations, it is designated neighborhoods. So high level, the policy environment for the site, the neighborhoods designation consists of residential uses and complementary facilities and services. These are intended to function together as a complete community. So these areas, we say they're stable, but they're not static. So while they are stable generally in character, the policies do recognize that change will occur over time, and that residential intensification is part of the evolution of a neighborhood. With that being said, that residential intensification should be compatible with the built form character of that neighborhood. In terms of the use categories, the proposed development would fall within the high density residential category of the neighborhood's designation. So these areas are characterized by multiple dwellings on the periphery of neighborhoods. They should have direct access to a collector or major arterial road. And I should say in this case, both Greenhill and Mount Albion are collector roads. Local commercial uses are permitted on ground floors of multiple dwellings, and there's a maximum permitted net residential density of 200 units per hectare. So the applicant has proposed through their official plan amendment to increase that to 364 units per hectare. Some high-level urban design policies. Development should be compatible with the existing and future uses of the surrounding area in terms of heights, massing, arrangement of buildings and structures. Should provide adequate landscaping and amenity features and buffering where required. The building height orientation, design, and massing should not unduly overshadow, block light, or result in the loss of privacy of adjacent residential uses. For buildings greater than 6 stories, building height should take into account the impact of public view corridors and general public views, in particular of the Niagara Escarpment. Development should use materials that are consistent and compatible with the surrounding context, and there should be an effort to create a continuous animated street edge in urban environments. So under zoning bylaw 05200, the property is zoned C3. And the C3 zone is a community commercial zone that reflects what's there right now, which is a commercial plaza. This is a zone that permits local commercial uses that are intended to serve residents within the surrounding neighborhood. There is an existing maximum building height of 14 meters. So the applicant has proposed modifications to permit multiple dwellings and street townhouses as a permitted use. Currently, residential uses are only permitted on the upper floor of a commercial use, and it can exceed 50% of the total gross floor area. So one of the modifications is to permit those multiple dwelling and street townhouse uses. To increase the building height and to modify the required setbacks, generally in accordance with the concept plan that they've submitted. So these are the specific areas of discussion staff are asking for a response on. First, does the proposal represent compatible integration with the surrounding area in terms of use, scale, form, and character? Second, does the proposal organize space in a logical manner through the design, placement, and construction of new buildings, streets, structures, and landscaping? And finally, is the proposal compatible with adjacent land uses, including matters such as shadowing, overlook, noise, lighting, traffic, and other nuisance effects? And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mark. I think we'll go right to the applicant presentation, and if there's questions in the general questions, we'll come back to you. So we're now ready for the consultant to provide additional information. Please keep the presentation under 10 minutes.
Thank you. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. First off, I want to say thank you very much for adding us to your very busy agenda today, being the third item that you're seeing. My name is Henry Burston. I'm a director at IBI Group and representing the architecture. I'm joined by Tim O'Brien, who's also from IBI Group as the landscape architect, as well Anki Zhang, who's on the call, has been working on this, and Lindsay Del Harris and Evan Sujin are here from Battlefields. What we're proposing is a purpose-built rental project of 527 units with two 12-story mid-rise buildings and two townhouse blocks. Here you can see the site is located at the corner of Greenhill and Mount Albion and has access to two bus routes and is walking distance to recreational centers and schools. Our site, which you can see highlighted in red, is about 3.58 acres in size and has a frontage along Greenhill of about 180 meters and Mount Albion of 111 meters. To the north, you can see the apartment blocks, which set the stage for mid-rise density, and our proposed towers are virtually identical in height. To the south, east, and west are a mix of townhouses intertwined with taller buildings. And we have single-family homes at the northeast corner of the site. There's also a fairly significant grade change on the site from the south east corner to the south west corner. There's a 4-meter drop from this high point from here to here, and then another 1.8 meter drop from here to the northern boundary of the site. Here you can see some of the buildings that we talked about within the context, with our site highlighted in red, and the single family homes being kind of the most sensitive portion of the site. And what's interesting is that right now you've got a retail plaza that's probably 50% occupied. It's addressed the grade in a very, very rudimentary way. Basically made everything flat from the low point on the site. And it results in some very strange conditions along the perimeter of the site, where you have a complete disconnect from the mall to the street. Actually, the mall's down many meters from the sidewalk. The site is also very car-centric, with a sea of asphalt and exposed garbage and loading areas directly adjacent to those sensitive areas. And the building is, of course, very disconnected from the street with large setbacks. And here you can see a few more of the views from the perimeter streets. So the site plan has been designed to create an urban street edge around the perimeter of the site. Two blocks of townhouses have been introduced on the east, adjacent to the low-rise housing, and acting as a transition in height. Building B has been arranged in a north-south orientation, allowing for framing of a pedestrian mews on the east and the outside amenity space courtyard on the west. And building A allows for generous outdoor patios and grade-related retail, and is a highly articulated facade. So with those generous setbacks, we really do create opportunities for landscaping to deal with the slopes across the site. The west end of the building has been dropped in relationship as another transition to the neighboring sites. There are 3 access points on the site right now. There's basically a north-south or an east-west connection through these running along the north end of the site, which allows access to ramps and loading within the buildings, and access to surface-related parking, which is linked directly to our retail for convenience. And there's a north-south connection going to a drop-off, which allows for some easy pickup Oftentimes we see rental buildings have elderly people, so we're trying to allow them to have short walks and access to those vehicles. All the loading and garbage functions are located within the buildings, and the parking is primarily below grade. The streetscape has been completely transformed into an urban setting, focused on the pedestrians and the public realm. Here you can see the ground floor, where each townhouse has individual front yards and entrances, and the townhouses also provide multiple housing choices on the site. We've introduced a split in the townhouses to allow for access to a double loaded lobby. So there's easy access for building B to the street. And we've also allowed for the about 1,000 square meters of retail to be introduced on the site, or basically replaced on the site, turning the corner along Greenhill. And this is going to be service related retail, and we think that that's going to be a good amenity for both this site and the community. On the north end, we have indoor amenity space with a rental office and also a laundry room for the residents, facing onto an outdoor plaza and outdoor amenity area. And there's also a dog area north of building B. So overall, the site is much more permeable and pedestrian friendly. In addition to the outdoor amenity on the ground, we also have some on the roof of the first floor in this one building. And you can see as we move through the floor plates that there's a lot of articulation and movement along the facades, going to the smaller floor plates at the top. What you can see on this slide is the three distinct parts of the mid-rise: the base, podium, and lighter mansard floors at the top. The section also demonstrates the transition to the neighborhood with the most restrictive interpretation of the 45-degree angular plane from the residential property lines. And I note that this is from townhouses on this one, and which, and frankly, I think townhouses in themselves are meant to act as a transition massing, and they often do get paired up with mid-rises. And in my view, they're an acceptable adjacency even without an angular plane. But regardless, we've made provisions to allow for, and demonstrate efforts to deal with that transition as well. Here you can see the re-envisioned street. Building A has been designed as a step facade with overlapping bay windows relating to clear breaks in the facade to create a highly articulated and interesting street wall. Glass corners and the top also break down the massing even further. On the ground floor, new frontages for the retail. We want to offer as much flexibility as we can. New canopies, controlled signage. We really want to activate the street and give back to the larger community with a mix of uses. On this is along Mount Albion, so these are the townhouse facades. You can see a lot of changes in materials, interesting rhythm being created along Mount Albion. There are manicured front yards, lots of room for landscaping, and a slight rise in elevation above grade. This creates basically an environment where you have eyes on the street. It's a much safer pedestrian environment, replacing the sunken service and garbage related functions that the neighbors are looking at right now. And what we have here is this outdoor amenity space at the north, which I'll let Tim describe in more detail. I'll pass it on to you, Tim.
Okay, we're running a little low on time here, so I hope you're brief.
We have 1 minute or so.
1 minute? Okay, I'll whip through this. Thanks, Henry. And you've largely gained the impression sort of what the outdoor space offers here. This is the overall master plan, and really what we looked at from this stage is having a continued design language throughout the entire site, responding outwardly as well as inwardly, enhanced streetscapes on both Mount Albion, Greenhill, with enhanced courtyard and circulation throughout. Next slide, Henry. This central space in focus here is sort of dynamic, and we wanted to subtly adapt to the grades here. So it's sort of a mix of hardscape plaza with a roundabout drop-off area, combined with park space and natural playground, passive and active areas combined in one, and sort of catering to a dynamic tenant base. We've offered provisions for a dog park as well. Next slide. The streetscape being one of the most critical pieces, responding to the outward context, softening the transition between public and private with these sort of landscape islands, adding green space and softscape to the site, and really providing that change from what's experienced right now with that drop. As Henry had mentioned, this will all be flush and porous with quick access to bike parking and framing enhanced spaces for the retail at grade there. Next slide. And as Henry briefly mentioned, sort of continuing that quality and design language vertically as well. So providing spaces on I believe this is the first floor rooftop amenity area with, opportunities for vegetable gardens, outdoor cooking, and typical things you'd see, but basically continuing the design language and supporting the building architecture, not just on the ground level. I think it's about as Cole's notes as I can get for the landscape design strategy, so I can leave it there.
Thanks for your patience and letting us finish. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll turn it over to the panelists for any clarification questions, and starting with Joey.
Thanks, David. I don't have any clarification questions. Thank you.
How about Eldon?
Excuse me, one question of clarification. If you could go back to the site plan or the landscape plan that shows the site. I know you've shown some angular planes from the site, but I'm curious, and particularly looking at this plan right here, whether an angular plane was taken from the southwest corner of the rear lot of that home to the proposed 12-story building.
Are you referring to here?
No. Top end.
Oh, here?
No. Oh yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Not necessarily from this particular corner, no. Because effectively what we've done here is provided for townhouses to create some transition, and then basically this being at a diagonal, that's effectively the transition that we're looking to achieve there. Not necessarily a 45 degree from that particular angle. A lot of times you would, if you were to apply that, it might be here or there. The strictest term of a 45 from this point, no.
If you were to apply it, would you penetrate it?
I think it's likely because we're basically at 36 meters in height, and you're not going to see a 36 meter. I don't think that's close to 36 meters.
Okay, I know my colleagues will have questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yana.
Hi, and I apologize again for my camera, which doesn't seem to be working with WebEx today. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Ted.
Hi there. I heard in the presentation that there's 200, and correct me if I'm wrong, 200 units per hectare is available through zoning, but you're asking for, is it 300?
I think the number was higher, but I'll defer that to the city planner.
362 is actually what we were asking.
Okay, so 200 allowable, 362 is being, in terms of density, is being proposed.
That's right.
And in the statement of submission, there was in the provision where you're not meeting zoning, I guess this is one area in terms of density. Are there other areas that you can highlight for us that are not meeting the zoning provisions?
Is that directed at us, or is that directed to the city planner?
Yeah, I guess you, Henry, you're aware of.
Well, I think one of the items was height that was highlighted. I think there was a 14-meter height. There was a bit of a brief that went through the city planner's presentation. So certainly there, that is something that needs to be dealt with, and of course, arrangement and basically creating a site-specific rezoning that's tailored to our proposal. So, I think that's effectively what we're applying for here.
Okay, and it wasn't brought up, but are there any sustainability goals that are being pursued within this project beyond code compliance?
I think that we will be beyond code compliance, and there are basically, this is a purpose-built rental. So our client basically operates the building and retains the building afterwards. So there's always a fairly detailed review about trying to bring in the most efficient mechanical equipment and other measures. Specifically get requests to do more tighter envelopes. So we have lower floor to ceiling heights, for instance, 8 feet clear, and also punch windows, a very efficient envelope. All of those things are really on the radar of our client. And as well, that's going to be kind of brought through the rest of the design in terms of landscape items, where we've been looking at specific plantings that are also a little bit more sustainable. So it's a slew of things, really. As doing these, it's a bit of a menu item. Even picking local materials and local and brick and other items. It really is quite a number of criteria that you put together in order to kind of create a sustainable package.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Jennifer?
Thank you, David, and thanks all for your presentations. I've got a couple of questions. A lot of them are focused on just making sense of some of the items that I saw on the concept plan. One of them, you've shown a really large retail space with only a couple of entrances along Greenhill. I was wondering if you could speak to the intent or the ability to have smaller commercial tenants in those spaces.
Okay, so maybe I can zoom in on that. I mean, we definitely would have the ability to add doors and have some smaller retail spaces. What we have done right now is basically put a placeholder in terms of allowing for some of that. There are some decisions that would need to be made at some point because of the grade difference, and each one of the, as we're basically dropping a few meters across the site through here. So in order to have that level access, we wanted to have a few doors. The final door location is not set because we don't know exactly the tenants, but this one's going to be a little bit trickier because effectively, if you want to have additional accesses, then the floors would have to also drop in order to kind of access them. So I think once we get a little bit further along and there's discussions between our client and maybe even some of the people who are actually in the mall now, if they want to move, that would give us a little bit of a better sense of what the actual demising may be. And but really, it doesn't necessarily have to be those tenants either. So it is designed to be flexible. You can see it's set up on basically the residential grid, 20-foot grid, but the slope is a consideration. So One way we might handle it is just have a lower, drop the whole thing lower, and then have ability to put in, raised flooring to create that kind of flexibility, to allow for more smaller units to be within the project.
Thank you. My other questions are all kind of to do with graphics. One was there's some purple squares being shown on the site and the ground floor plan. I think it's 2324 we're looking at them. I was wondering what those purple squares are. They're along Greenhill Avenue frontage, kind of at the corner near Harris Ford Street.
Is it on this plan?
Yeah, if you zoom in, just in front of the retail, really at the corner.
I think that's a landscape item there, Jennifer. Yeah. Just sort of suggesting that the potential tenants have the space to sort of spill out into that area. They're suggestive of, canopy cover, things like that.
Okay. Thanks. So not really maybe a final design intent, but communicating what could be. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
And also in kind of the outdoor amenity space on the back side of that, there's a number of rocks shown. I was wondering if the intent of that is decorative or if those are intended as more additional seating.
Are you talking sort of in the central area there?
Yeah, just below your cursor under five. Yeah.
Sort of unique furnishings, things that are interchangeable, movable, dual purpose, if they can serve as, barriers in any way. Yeah, just suggestive.
Okay, and then the final was you've shown in the rooftop amenity area, you've shown an area that's fenced off. I was wondering what the intent is for that space.
Yeah, that we sort of, I think if you could go to 42, or that one.
42, sure. Sorry.
Yep. Either one works there, Henry. Fenced off as sort of a community garden, Jennifer, just to provide some separation. I don't know if it needs to, keep smaller children out or anything, but basically just to delineate that's not part of the kitchen or the dining area.
Okay, thank you. And similarly on the opposite kind of corner from that, I was wondering what the blue boxes are intended to represent.
Ping pong tables and general recreation, a shuffleboard court, sort of rooftop activity, minor.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
You have good eyes, I have to say that.
Yeah.
Oda.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I have a question about the amenity on the ground level, on the central part. I was wondering, are you seeing that area just for the residents of the complex, or people from the neighborhood could have access to that? It's a kind of public space or just amenity?
There's nothing physically prohibitive from entering the site. Obviously, that's part of the intent of this, but it is geared towards the tenants in particular.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and another question is about the short-term parking. I see along the north side of the site there are ground level parking spot available. Just wondering for the building B and townhouses, the short-term parking will be the same here. So is there any other spot available for them?
Well, right now, a lot of that has kind of been geared to just allow the retail to be successful, just to create convenience. There will likely be a bit of an overlap if there are visitors that want to come to the site and park on the surface. But the reality is there's two ramps, one ramp here and one ramp there, that provides access to the basement, and there's more visitor parking within the basement levels that and they'd be able to come up the elevator of building B and effectively come out to those townhouses, because they're all basically the same tenure. So that's how that could work. Alternately, they could come back up this way, but generally that's the easiest way for anybody to access the townhouses if you're parking below grade.
And so the customers of the retails should come on the back, either going to the underground parking or park at the back side of the.
The idea was that this would be really intended for people visiting these retail units. So it's not fully restrictive, but generally the idea was that a lot of people seem to like the convenience of that, and it would help the viability of those units if we could provide some surface parking that related directly to them. So that's their primary focus, and then secondary would be potentially visitor parking for everybody else.
Okay, thank you. That was for me.
I just would ask can you pull up your elevation drawing?
Sure.
Of the
This
tower.
one or a different one?
Well, I guess my question is maybe I'm not looking that carefully, but you commented on how within the sustainability, in answering Ted's question, you commented on the sustainability and how you're looking to punched windows and whatnot. But the general rendering of the towers is seems to have areas of quite a lot of glass, which is not really punched window solution. I don't know where you are with that, or whether you want to elaborate on your sustainability answer.
Well, there is, if you look through the,
okay,
there's a couple of ways. It's not, of course, it's not fully one way or the other. What we tried to do, or at least aesthetically do, was whenever we do a mid-rise building, 12 stories, and we introduce steps, the idea is in order to create the top floors being lighter, we generally do go with more glazing through here. The final height of the spandrel that may be behind some of these balconies, that might be determined later. Through here, a lot of this is punch window, but there are punctuated areas of glazing, yes. And then the lower level, you can see effectively our punch. So it's a mix throughout the entire building. It's not a full commitment to one or the other. We do recognize that there is some glazing still here, but it's targeted. It's really targeted to create an emphasis on the corner entrances, and also create the top of the building being lighter.
Okay, I don't have any other questions. Thank you. I'll turn over to the panelists for commentary, and we'll start with Joey, if you could.
Thanks, David, and thanks for the presentation. Sorry, this is something that I wanted to bring up earlier, but the existing strip mall is an extensive footprint, and even though it's only a single, about 1 story, there's quite a bit of brick in cladding, and I noticed that you will likely be proposing brick for the lower levels. I'm wondering if there's a salvage opportunity there and a reuse for the new, I guess all three forms. Is that
Sorry,
considering, or
is this still? Am I still responding in this portion, or are we still in questions? Because it just want to make sure that I'm.
Sorry, I meant we're out of questions. We're in comments now. But
we will let you go. We will let you answer that. We're not too rigid on this here.
Sure. I just want to understand how the format works. It's something that we can bring up to our clients. Those kinds of things you'd have to see what the condition is of the brick, and then I think in my mind, my biggest concern might be that there's not enough of it, because you really want to be somewhat consistent through these three phases to allow for a continuity of materials and other things to happen within the building. So that building is nowhere in size compared to what we have on site. But it's, we'll talk to our client about it.
Yeah. Okay, I just suspected that there was a document and salvage report as part of this process, since the existing building will be completely demolished. Overall, my comments, I'll keep it brief. I appreciate how this development does provide residential intensification, and I think it is a much better proposal than what is existing. And I do also appreciate that it is aligned with the approach to the mid-century modern development to the, I guess, the north or the east of it, and how it is, in the same way providing density. I think ultimately the success of the project will rely on the landscape plan, really, because, and especially in comparison to the mid-century modern development, because typically those developments didn't consider landscape or public space at all. So I think this one will be important in as a critique to that one, and then providing that important public space. Also, I think with the architecture, that the scale of the townhome and the way that the lower level of both buildings respond to the landscape and to public space and public realm, I think will be important as well. So it's nice to see that there is attention being paid to that. And I think with further development, it will work out quite well. Jen's comment about the graphic images, and Tim noting that the ping pong tables in that one, I guess, upper level amenity space raised a little concern for me, in that I realized that could be quite a nice amenity space, but it's hitting a pinch point. And it seems that that amenity space is sort of crammed into the corner of the building and the part of that site. And I'm wondering if there's opportunity to kind of expand that a little bit, maybe provide a bit of a cantilever over the surface parking, because I think trying to put 4 ping pong tables in that one little area, especially if there's 4 games happening at once, it'll be a bit of a disaster. I don't think there's enough clearance for the players. But thank you for your presentation, and good luck.
Eldon.
Hi. Thanks again for your presentation, and I agree with a lot of Joey's comments and shared. I only have a few things to share, and I really appreciate the effort that's been made with respect to this proposal, particularly the thought around programming at the ground level, and how the buildings connect and how things move. Couple of thoughts. You heard my comments as it relates to the angular plane. I'm not completely satisfied with the response that was shared. I really think you should think about that spatial separation as it relates to that building. The other thing to consider is that when you look at your shadow study, it appears as if a large component of your amenity area for the large part of the day is in shadow. And it seems as if perhaps if the westerly building were re-angled instead of along Greenhill Avenue, but perhaps internally, that may improve your solar access to that space. Something to consider. It's notable when you look at both the spring and fall equinoxes. Just the orientation of the 12-story building produced a lot of shadow in that space, and perhaps some might connect to that, but the buildings do present as very long buildings, particularly along the streetscape, and any efforts to either through materiality or through projections to further break up that appearance of the length of those buildings would ensure that you're not necessarily replicating the 1960s, 1970s slab building, but taking it one step further and creating a greater articulation of built form along the streetscape. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Jana?
Thank you. I agree with what was said. I would only add that when redesigning this site, I would suggest more variety in build form to be added and much more interest. For such long slab buildings, I think that variety in the massing and height is very, very important to create a more human scale and more interesting build form. I think this could be a really great development if designed well. I appreciate your presentation and a lot of elements of this development. I think it will be great. I would strongly suggest to lower the buildings, the mid-rise buildings, or at least one of them, and then to maybe step the upper stories of the other one further away, and or create a more varied roof line even within the mid-rise buildings themselves, and also distinguish the upper stories from the rest of the buildings, from the rest of the building in a different way than using glass and spandrel. I really think that's still perceived as massing and sometimes also very harsh material. So maybe a better form and materials could be also used. But generally just a variety for these long slab buildings would help, and lowering at least one of them. That's all for me. Thank you very much.
Ted?
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for the presentation, and it was a well-prepared submission that was helpful for us to review. And I would say, I appreciate the open space provisions and the porosity that's being achieved at grade on the site plan and in the approach to the landscape design. I think it's well conceived and thorough. And I appreciate the scale of the townhomes to the east. I think that's quite successful in the Muse, and the the porosity that comes with that and the publicness, frankly, and appreciate the commercial along Greenhill, and that lower continuity of the frontage, I think, and the outdoor amenity or outdoor space facing south. I think that could be very successful and add to the quality of this community, this neighborhood, with some successful retail spaces there. Generally, I'll echo some of the responses I've heard on both the scale and the density. I'm generally okay with the density. It's just the way it's disposed on site is I find it challenging. The buildings are, I think, extremely long. They've been compared to the 4 or 5 immediate neighbors that are 12-story slabs. But if you look at them, they're what's being proposed is about 50% longer, somewhere in there, than what's existing. And I think the ones there are actually pretty long. It would be preferable to see more diversity of the response to the street frontage, particularly the, I guess, building A of the two, with more variety in the massing, the form, and the character of the development, particularly at the upper level. Ideally, the A and B would be 2 buildings each, or at least at the upper levels. They could be broken in the form. And I think you could still achieve the density on that site with the breaks in the massing that really kind of started to articulate these in a more in a scale that maybe fit the neighborhood now and in the future a little better. Also appreciate the landscape along the northern edge as a pedestrian route, and I know this is private space, but it's almost connecting with the grid of streets in this community, and it was wondering if that sidewalk could become a little more continuous and allow for, like the Muse and the arrival space, a more porous movement through the site to be an amenity for the community. And I also would just suggest, can that amenity space be having a controlled access to that lower outdoor amenity space for the benefit of the users? I appreciate that there may be security risks, but it seems like they would would serve the residents well if they had a connection in some way. But generally, like the density, would love to see the massing further broken up and articulated. Thank you.
Jennifer.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentations. I would generally echo my colleagues. I agree the public space is a key feature to this design to help justify the massing and the density that's being proposed, and I generally agree with all the preceding comments on built form as well. I'd add that my main concerns are really around the shadowing impacts on the residents that are northeast of the site, 3 of those being heavily impacted by building B. So some consideration for massing alternatives to allow more sunlight there should be considered. Similarly with the outdoor amenity space, if there's additional massing elements that could be contemplated to help alleviate that condition. Also, the rear-facing townhouse units, again, also don't have a very ideal condition in terms of shadowing. They're shadowed for most of the day by building B. Potentially a greater setback here or wider step backs for building B could help alleviate this and the shadow impacts that are happening northeast of the site as well. In terms of the public realm, I think you've done a lot that's great, and I'll get to that. But I would also encourage you to explore the opportunity to support some smaller retail tenants along Greenhill Avenue. Sounds like you've already given a lot of consideration for this, so I hope that that can come to fruition. I appreciate the provision of planters and the seating that you've proposed along Greenhill Avenue. I think that really complements the streetscapes. I do think the paving area there is maybe wider than it needs to be in some places. It's exceeding 3 meters wide, and that's likely going to be more than you need for a pedestrian clear zone to support the amount of retail and pedestrian traffic that's going to be generated. So there may even be an opportunity here to either provide formal fenced-in patio space for the retail units, as the drawing seems to suggest, or to expand the planted areas and provide that additional soil volume so you can get more trees within the site property limits. I'm also pleased to see the provision of bike parking for the residents and for the commercial tenants. However, there seems to be a bit of a lack of at-grade short-term parking. There's only about 10 on the ground floor, where you have like over 200 for the residents. I'd encourage you to maybe provide some additional bike parking, and that the ones servicing the retail are located adjacent to those uses. So within the streetscape itself, that could even be in line with your proposed planters, for example, to make sure you have convenient access to those units. I am really pleased overall to see the amenity spaces you provided and the programming, both at the ground floor and the 3rd floor rooftop garden. You've done a few things here that I think are really good, like having the change in paving in the central area to communicate that as a pedestrian priority area. The connection that you were showing from Mount Albion through that pedestrian street carried all the way to the amenity space are really great design features. And overall, it's really great to see the proposed redevelopment of this site. And I'm looking forward to seeing it build. So thank you.
Hoda.
Yes, David, I would like to thank you for the presentation and the awesome project that is going on. You are doing great about animating the Greenhill Street and having more retail along that, having the amenity on the ground level, and providing opportunity for residents. I'm really pleased and appreciate that. There is a point that I would like, first of all, I would like to echo my colleagues' comments about the length of the buildings and the shade effect on the site, and also connect that to the pedestrian connectivity through the site. Probably by one move you can reach both goals by cutting or breaking down the length of the buildings to smaller, maybe in the half, two smaller buildings instead of building A and B. By that, providing the pedestrian connection through the street, from the street through the site, and also giving access from the parking lots to the retails, as well as I feel that the house towns at the side of the building B, they lost the connection to the whole site. I feel that they has been at the side and not be a part of the site. So probably giving more pedestrian access from the townhouses to the central yard and amenities will be great. And thank you again. That's from me.
So I guess I'm the wrap up here. I think in general, I think it's a pretty successful proposal. I think that I agree with the comments of my colleagues. Certainly the ground plane and the lower portions, the townhouse level and the kind of lower features of the taller buildings seem to be pretty successfully developed. There's some concern, as many have said, with the length and scale of the upper buildings and their shadow impact. I have to admit, I'm not totally convinced that you can solve that within the the density ambitions that you have. Maybe you are overshooting the appropriate density on the site, and maybe a little less ambitious on that level would make it easier to address some of the concerns that have been raised. In general, though, I certainly support the development, and the other comment is, in terms of the glazing, I'm not as convinced as we are finding about the performance of glazing as a solution for residential buildings in the long run, whether they're from an energy point of view as well as a durability point of view, if that quantity of glazing is really the best solution to introduce variety into the elevations of these buildings. And then just at a really granular level, it seemed on the sort of raised terrace that one of the units at least seemed to look right into the terrace at the tiniest point, and I think maybe you might want to re-examine that relationship. And the bicycle parking seems to be very centric to building A, and the townhouses and the amenity or the building B are quite a ways from the indoor parking. It seems pretty easy to imagine that you might be able to rearrange that to more democratically distribute that. So that's a pretty fine-grained commentary. But otherwise, yes, I think that totally appropriate development with some refinement. It could be great success. Turn it back to you if you have any questions of the panel.
No, I very much appreciate all your comments and varied point of views on a number of portions of the project. I always find these fairly enlightening, so very much appreciated, and we'll circle back with our client about how we respond.
Okay. Thank you, Henry, and your whole team. Thank you for the panel for a long day.
Appreciate your time.
Okay. Yeah. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye for now.